What's up, everyone? Today I am doing another redraft. This time I'm going to be redrafting the 2020 NFL draft class. We saw that draft class was stacked, a ton of good quarterbacks like Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow both put up stagger numbers. We saw Jonathan Taylor play out of his mind. We saw both Justin Jefferson, Chase Claypool, CeeDee Lamb played sensational. There was a bunch of other good offensive linemen, a bunch of other good defensive players. So today I will be doing if I could redraft that draft class. So let's get into it. So with my first overall pick, I have the Bengals taking Justin Herbert this time, and I think he did a little bit better than Joe Burrow. Just because, Joe Burrow had the injury, so it's kind of hard to go by it. But otherwise, I think stat-wise, Herbert was better. He was the offensive rookie of the year. And, it's kind of not fair because Burrow was hurt. And if Burrow wasn't hurt, he probably would have won the offensive rookie of the year. But at this point, I have Justin Herbert going number one to the Bengals. This pick might surprise some people, too. I have, with the number 2 pick, the Washington football team taking Joe Burrow. And I don't think Chase Young obviously was not a bust. Like, he was a great pick. Like, he was the defensive rookie of the year, and seems like he could be a future Hall of Famer at this point. But, like, sometimes it seems like franchise quarterbacks are better than franchise DNs. And that Washington line already has Montez Sweat and underrated player and Jonathan Allen. And I think if you did bring Joe Burrow in, I think the Washington football team would have done just as well last season now, because it seemed like quarterback was kind of the one spot they needed to fill. Now they have Ryan Fitzpatrick, so it doesn't matter. But I think at that time, going into that season, you pick up Joe Burrow, who, like I said, probably would have won Offensive Rookie of the Year if it wasn't for the injury last season. Now with the number 3 overall pick, this time I have the Detroit Lions taking Chase Young, and a lot of people are going to say that Jeff Okudah was a bust, and I don't think he was a bust at all, but he was just injured a lot last season. There were games that he played where he did play well. Like, he had 2 interceptions in one game last season, so he wasn't a bust. He just was injured most of the season. But obviously Chase Young was better, and that's why I have him going at this spot. He would have impacted the Lions defense, definitely. And I think right now we see the Lions are in rebuilding mode for the most part. So I think, Chase Young would have fit well in that spot right now. With the number 4 pick, I have the New York Giants taking Tristan Wirfs in the spot. We saw that the offensive line has been a major problem for the New York Giants, and there were 3 stellar linemen last year, and unfortunately the one that the Giants selected did not play that well. So I think Tristan Wirfs was the best out of those 3 that did do well last year. He was on the Super Bowl winning champion Buccaneers and was the best player on that line. And look at this. He ended up having to block, guys like Cam Jordan, Khalil Mack, Aaron Donald. So you have to look at that too, like who he was going up against. So that's why I think he was the best lineman in this draft class, and that's why I think he's going here at number 4. So now at number 5, I have the Miami Dolphins taking Justin Jefferson at this spot, and I don't think Tua was a bust at all. He did actually better, in my opinion, than a lot of people are saying he did. It's just, I think, like Ryan Fitzpatrick, they would have been fine if they had Ryan Fitzpatrick and he was the starting quarterback for the whole season. That's why I have Justin Jefferson in this spot. It would have added more weapons to that offense. And like I said earlier, I don't think Tua was a bust at all. I think it was completely fine that they took Tua. I think he did fine last season as the Dolphins quarterback. It's just, like I said also, like, they did fine when Ryan Fitzpatrick was the quarterback, so that's why I have Justin Jefferson going at this spot. Now at number 6, I have the Los Angeles Chargers taking Tua Tagovailoa, and I think they just needed a quarterback more at this spot. Tyrod Taylor ended up getting hurt. So I think Tua would have fit fine with this offense. So that's why I have the Chargers going with Tua Tagovailoa at this spot. Number 7, I have the Carolina Panthers taking Jeremy Chin, a player who they got later in the draft. I think at this point you would just want to take him to protect him from some other teams. And we saw last year the Carolina Panthers go only defense in the draft, and I think it worked out fine. And I mean, at this point, they have Sam Darnold now as quarterback, so I think they'll be fine at this point after drafting all defense. I mean, Jeremy Chin was a candidate for Defensive Rookie of the Year. We saw him against the Vikings this season score 2 defensive touchdowns on back-to-back plays, was the first player in NFL history to do that. So I think after the way Chin performed last year, you take him at the spot so that you can get him before another team would get him. Now at number 8, I have the Arizona Cardinals taking Antoine Winfield Jr. at the spot, another candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. We saw last year them get Isaiah Simmons, who he didn't develop great last season, but I mean, I think he did fine. He just wasn't the star that we saw at Clemson, and I just think if they get Antoine Winfield at the spot, he helps out that defense a lot better like he did with the Bucs last season. And I think Isaiah Simmons can still develop. I think he could still be a really good player. I just think Antoine Winfield was better last season, so at this point, you would take Antoine Winfield at number 8. Number 9, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars taking Jalen Johnson. And we saw them last season take C.J. Henderson, and I don't think he was a bust. He just wasn't, great. I think there's still time for him to develop, but Jalen Johnson played better as a rookie, so at this point right now, we have the Jaguars taking Jalen Johnson. I mean, we saw their defense was horrible last season, so I think Jalen Johnson could have changed it a little bit, but we don't know. But at this point, Jalen Johnson would have been better with the Jaguars than C.J. Henderson was last season. So at number 10, I have the Cleveland Browns taking Jedrick Willis, a player that they ended up getting in the real draft. And we saw the Browns ended up having one of the worst offensive lines in the league to having one of the best offensive lines in the league. And part of that was when they added Jedrick Willis, and I think he was a big part of why their team ended up getting to the playoffs, and I think he will have an impact on their team going forward. Now at number 11, I have the New York Jets taking Mekhi Becton, a player who they also got in the real draft. He was one of the only bright spots on the Jets team last season, and I mean, the Jets have struggled with their offensive line a lot, and Mekhi Becton helped that out a little bit last season, but I definitely think that he'll help out Zach Wilson this season now that he has support a little bit on the offensive line now, and I think he will end up like both Willis and Wirfs being one of the best offensive linemen in the league by next season. So at number 12, I have the Las Vegas Raiders taking Derek Brown. We saw last season their defense was atrocious. So I think at this point, I just went out and found the best defensive player available at this point and added it to their team, who was Derek Brown at this point. I mean, in my opinion, their secondary was more of a problem than their D-line last year, but Derek Brown was the best defensive player available at this point. So at this point, just you take what's available. And I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking Mike Onwenu, who was an offensive lineman last year for the New England Patriots, and he did well last season. And we saw the Buccaneers, the one weakness they had on their team before they drafted Tristan Wirfs last year was their offensive line, and Tristan Wirfs was great, but now that he's gone at this point, you just take another lineman, and at this point, the best one available was Onwenu. So I think Onwenu doesn't live up to the full potential that Tristan Wirfs led up to in Tampa Bay, but I think even if this pick still happens, that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers still end up fine, and they would still end up winning the Super Bowl like they did last year. So number 14, I have the San Francisco 49ers taking Patrick Queen, who was a linebacker for the Ravens last season, and he did well last season. I think he would have had a better impact on the Niners than Javon Kinlaw did. Javon Kinlaw didn't fully live up to potential. I think Queen would have impacted their defense a lot last year, and with all the injuries last season that happened with the Niners, who knows what could have happened if Patrick Queen was there. Number 15, I have the Denver Broncos taking CeeDee Lamb. We saw them draft Jerry Jeudy in the real draft, who didn't fully live up to potential. And like I think with a lot of these rookies, they still have time to develop. They're not bust, but CeeDee Lamb would have been better because we saw in Dallas, he was playing with backup quarterbacks and was still putting up big numbers. So I think if he could do all that with backup quarterbacks, he would have been just fine in Denver. Actually, would have been good in Denver. 16, I have the Atlanta Falcons taking Isaiah Simmons. We saw that they needed tons of help with their defense last year. We saw A.J. Terrell did not live up to potential. And, I mean, Isaiah Simmons didn't live up to potential a whole lot in Arizona his rookie season, but I think with a defensive-minded coach, he would have done a lot better and possibly lived up to potential in Atlanta. 17, I have the Dallas Cowboys taking Ladarius Sneed, and we saw the Cowboys, their defense was a big problem last season, and mainly their secondary, so I think you add Ladarius Sneed, that secondary isn't as bad last year. I mean, CeeDee Lamb was a good draft pick, but he's gone at this point. So at this point, you just try to help your defense. And maybe Ladarius Sneed could have made an impact on the Cowboys' defense last year. For 18, I have the Las Vegas Raiders taking Jordan Fuller, who I thought was a little bit of an underrated rookie last year. I mean, he picked off Tom Brady 2 times last year. I mean, I'm not being a biased Rams fan at this point. I'm actually, because I watched Jordan Fuller play more last year, I think he was underrated. He had a few big tackles. He had a big tackle in the first game against the Cowboys, against CeeDee Lamb, that was on 4th down, that possibly won the Rams the game last year. And we saw the Raiders take Damon Arnett, who was pretty much a bust last year, and we saw, like I said earlier, their secondary was a big problem last year, so I think drafting Jordan Fuller, this maybe fills that out a little bit. 19, I have the Miami Dolphins taking Jonathan Taylor, and I think with Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback, you add both Jonathan Taylor and Justin Jefferson to the offense from last season. The Dolphins are probably a playoff team. I mean, they had that great defense, and you add both Jefferson and Taylor, that team would be in the playoffs. 20, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars taking Trevon Diggs, and a lot of people I think would be surprised because I think he blew up coverage a lot last year, and we just saw their defense was not good last year, and we already drafted Jalen Johnson for them, and I think Trevon Diggs did a very good job in tackling last season. He was a great tackler for the Cowboys last year. He had some key tackles in a few games. So I think at this point, now that they did get Jalen Johnson, that's all that would matter with bringing Trevon Diggs in. So at number 21, I have the Philadelphia Eagles taking Chase Claypool. And I mean, Jalen Reagor didn't do bad last year. He was just hurt most of the season. I mean, he was good when he was not hurt. And I think, I mean, obviously if they had Justin Jefferson, he would have been a lot better. But at this point, since Jefferson is gone, you take Chase Claypool at the spot, and he would have done a lot better with the Eagles, especially with their receiving core being all beat up last year with Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson being out to injuries most of last season. I mean, Chase Claypool scored 4 touchdowns in one game last season. It was good for my fantasy team because I picked him up after that game, and was great the rest of the season. And I think he would have helped the whole Eagles offense if the Eagles drafted him. So number 22, I have the Minnesota Vikings taking Brandon Ayuk, who did great for the 49ers last year. And I mean, Jefferson was a great draft pick last season, but with him not available, they draft Ayuk at this point. And I think he still would have done well in Minnesota like he did in San Francisco. And I mean, he did well in San Francisco with a ton of backup quarterbacks. So we'll see what he could be with the 49ers starting quarterbacks next season. 23, I have the New England Patriots not trading out of the spot and taking Jalen Hurts. I think he would have been a good backup for Cam Newton last year when he did start to struggle. And I think with Jalen Hurts, with Bill Belichick as his coach, would have been able to develop really well and would have maybe led the Patriots to a few more wins last season if Jalen Hurts played when Cam Newton struggled. Number 24, I have the New Orleans Saints taking Cesar Ruiz. I think he helped the offensive line of the Saints a lot more last year than people anticipate. But I think at the end of the day, there is no regrets about the Saints taking Cesar Ruiz at this spot. So number 25, I have the Minnesota Vikings also not trading out of this spot, and this time taking C.J. Henderson. We saw the Vikings take a few secondary guys last year, a few defensive guys last year, but Justin Jefferson was their only rookie that lived up to be good last season, and I think C.J. Henderson would have done better in Minnesota with a defensive-minded coach. So now I also have the Dolphins not trading out of their spot and taking Jordan Love. And actually, he went in that exact same spot in the draft, but just to the Packers because the Packers traded up to get Jordan Love, which I don't know what they were thinking of. So it was like, I don't know why the Packers traded up to get him. I mean, we all know the stuff going on with Aaron Rodgers right now, but they didn't even have to trade up to get him, and they didn't even have to draft him in the first round. He would have been available in many other rounds, but I think just he's a good fit with the Dolphins, just being the future quarterback there, and also he can develop a little bit with Justin Jefferson and Jonathan Taylor, who we also had in this draft, going to the Dolphins. So number 27, I have the Seattle Seahawks taking Andrew Thomas. We all saw that he didn't live up to potential with the Giants, but at this point, the Seahawks just need help on the offensive line. Russell Wilson was sacked 52 times all of last season, so they just need to go out and get an offensive lineman just to try to help protect Russell Wilson. I don't know if he would have made that much of a difference, but it's still offensive lineman help. 28, I have the Baltimore Ravens taking Kenneth Murray. We saw the Ravens did need linebacker help, and now with Patrick Queen gone, I think Kenneth Murray would have been just fine. He would have been good for the Ravens if playing in that spot. Number 29, I have the Tennessee Titans taking Javon Kinlaw. We saw the Titans definitely needed defensive line help, and I think Kinlaw would have been fine there. We saw in the real draft them draft Isaiah Wilson, who was a complete bust because they cut him the next season. So I think if they did have Javon Kinlaw, he would have made a little bit of an impact on that Tennessee Titans defense. Number 30, I have the Green Bay Packers taking A.J. Epinesa, who was a linebacker for the Bills. I think a bigger problem for the Packers last year than the receiving core was they couldn't stop the run. And we saw Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Adam Lazard step up last year, and I still think the Packers get a wide receiver later in the draft. You know, maybe they get a guy like Jerry Jeudy or Henry Ruggs or a guy like Michael Pittman Jr. But at this point, I think A.J. Epinesa was very underrated when playing on the Bills. I saw him make a few plays in some games last season, and I think he would have had an impact with the Packers when stopping the run game last year. For 31, I have the San Francisco 49ers taking T. Higgins, I think the only weakness they kind of had on their team was their receiving core, and T. Higgins was good, just since he was on the Bengals, it wasn't really noticeable, and I think he would have put up big numbers in San Francisco with a fully healthy team if he did play there. The last pick of the first round, I still have the Kansas City Chiefs taking Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We saw him be a big part in the Chiefs' run game last year. He put up some stellar numbers. We saw in his first game, he scored 2 touchdowns in that game. They all came off of big plays. And I think he had a big impact on the Chiefs' offense last year and was one of the reasons why they ended up getting to the Super Bowl last year. 2020 NFL Redraft. I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, please click like and subscribe. And in the comments, let me know if you guys had any questions about some of my picks.